Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amber and this is Fundy Freed. Before we get started today, I want to take the moment to thank every one of you that stopped in, and if you've come back, I really appreciate it. If you're new here, welcome. Today we are going to be doing a deep dive, going a different direction. The last two have been very biblical based. Today is going to be about the one and only transformed wife, the key holder to all godly womanhood, Lori Alexander. I do want to throw out a trigger warning really quick that she does have a lot of very derogatory and bad views of divorce, bodily autonomy, consent, physical abuse, and gender roles. So if topics like that are a little bit triggering, you do not have to watch the video. I will link up here the playlist for my other deep dives that are a little more light and fluffy and not so much heavy is what we're going to get into today. You can follow me on various platforms such as TikTok and Facebook. I'm very active on there during the week. Every week we have a new video here on Fridays. And one last thing, don't forget about the 500 subscriber challenge so you guys can see me torment myself with hot spicy things while trying to answer various types of Bible trivia or trivia in general. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Today I am going to be talking about Lori Alexander, who is known as the Transformed Wife on social media. She's a pretty prominent figure, especially for the women in more strict evangelical movements, especially like the IFB, the Quiverful movement, the IBLP, different things like that. She's very much associated with the Pearls, who wrote How to Train Up Your Child, and we'll talk about that more later. She puts out a lot of controversial information and topics, and honestly, I think a lot of it is just because she gets the clicks and the views because she is so controversial. Sometimes I wonder if she really believes what she says. And the reason I say that is because she tends to be really inconsistent. Sometimes she'll post one thing and then like not long after she'll post something else that's totally like different. And I'll show you kind of an example of that as I talk about her backstory. Today we'll do a little bit of a history on her and we'll talk about some of her tweets and content that she's put out. Jen over at Fundy Fridays has done a phenomenal job also doing a background or a deep dive on her, and I'll link her video below if you want to find out more information about Lori from a more atheistic standpoint. Today I'm going to take it from a former Fundy standpoint and try to talk about what she has. Lori Alexander was born on September 1st, 1958 in California, and from what I have read, she did go to a public school. And she claimed that she was very bullied in the public school, which honestly isn't surprising. There's a lot of bullying that does happen in public schools, especially in the 60s. She does have very inconsistent stories though about how she was raised. In some places, she talks about how her parents were wonderful. She had a great childhood. There were no issues. And then other places, she talks about how her parents fought all the time. So one thing she said, my mom and dad argued all the time when we were growing up, and we are so happy they never divorced. They are so happy together today. Concerning anger and substance abuse, it matters whether or not there is any abuse. If there is no physical abuse, a wife needs to practice 1 Peter 3:1-6. Her husband needs Jesus and the deliverance he can provide, and the Lord can use a humble, godly, and submissive wife to draw her husband to him. My parents were never happy together until about 5 years ago. And now they are madly in love with each other. Studies prove if those rocky marriages will just stick it out within 5 years or so, they will be much happier than those who did not. So the first Peter she's talking about is whenever it talks about how we can win our husbands with the quiet conversations or meek and quiet spirit or whatever. She literally says if there's no physical abuse, you basically cannot leave your husband. That doesn't matter if he's not. So it's basically as long as he doesn't touch you, you stay. Refocus here. In another spot though, comment that she put out in the Always Learning chat room, she said, I'm a lot older than most of you. My parents never fought about housework ever. They didn't fight about child raising either. They did fight about money, however. My dad worked hard to provide, and my mom took care of the home and us. Roles were clearly defined so that they never fought about their roles. I'm sure I sure fought with Ken about housework, but not childcare, since I breathed the feminist air most of my childhood. Did you hear your parents fight about housework or childcare? Give your ages too, if you don't mind. So she's saying in one spot that they never argued, and then in another spot that they argued all the time. So there's really no telling what exactly really went on. It just, I guess, whatever fits her narrative at the time and what point she's trying to make. So in the first point, she's trying to say, look, my parents stuck it out, and they're only in the last 5 years they've been happy. But they were miserable the other however many years they were married. And then another spot, they're like, they never fought about anything. They stayed in their assigned gender roles and they were happy. They just fought about money. It's not a big deal. So that may not seem like a really big deal to some, but I know for fundies and evangelicals, backstories and personal stories have a massive weight on our testimony and how we are perceived in our community. So if she is trying to make a point, she will, as obviously she has done, she will paint a picture of what things were like to prove the point in which she is trying to make. She married her husband, Ken Alexander, in December of 1980. They had a child and she was working, and she wanted to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. And so she told her husband she wanted to be at home, and he's like, you can't be home until we have another kid. So she actually purposely sabotaged her birth control so she could get pregnant again, so then she could stay home with her kids. She does have 4 children, and she has 13 grandchildren. She is very anti-birth control, even though she was on it herself. And in a tweet that she put up, she said, before birth control was accepted, no one would even think negative about women becoming pregnant with her 6th, 7th, or 8th child. Everyone knew babies were a product of sex and marriage. Now this is frowned upon even among Christians. Birth control mentality is not from God. Which I find fascinating because, you know, most of the time people are not having children, 1, because they can't afford them. 2, because there are health issues that are involved. Or 3, they can't have any more kids. And honestly, it is wiser to me to wait to have children to whenever you're a little more financially stable than whenever you're 18 or 19 years old. And only to have as many children as your budget or your life can possibly allow. Because I know there's going to be a lot of people that probably come after me for that, because there's a lot of people I know that are in the queerful movement who think that you should just have as many babies as possible for the army of Jesus. But here's the thing, is if my children are having to scrounge over a piece of bread for dinner because I don't have the money to put food on the table for them, that is not godly raising children. That is abuse in its own way, and it's neglect in its own way, and it's very irresponsible on the parents to continuously to have multiple children knowing that they cannot afford them. So Lori talks about in her story that she was married for 23 years before she realized that it was her fault. She was extremely unhappy, that she was constantly fighting against the gender roles, that she was expecting her husband to help around the house, help around, just do general things with the kids and general things just in life, and realized after reading an article that she was in the wrong and she was convicted and she had to get right with God. She went to her husband and said, hey, I am so sorry. What can I do now to better serve you? And became basically a puddle of goo in his hands to give herself up to him in every single possible way. That includes sexually if she doesn't even want it. She even goes as far as to say that if you neglect your husband sexually, you are actually abusing your husband. She says, depriving your husband sexually is an extreme emotional abuse. You destroy their soul, takes away their self-worth, makes them feel ugly, unwanted, unloved, breaks intimacy, stops chemical release of bonding, increases stress, creates conflict, anger. Never use sex as a weapon. I guess I could also flip that and say, men, don't use sex as a weapon against your wife. And meaning that stop using it as a form of control, because you taking sex from her, but whenever she is not consenting, will make them feel ugly and unwanted. It will make them feel unloved. It will break the intimacy. It will stop the chemical release of bonding. It will increase her stress, create conflict and anger. And it destroys a woman 100% to be used in this capacity. Now, I am not going to say there are not some women who do totally 100% deprive their husbands or their boyfriends or their partners because they want to control them. Like, you don't want to wash the dishes, so I'm not going to do this. This is not what this is talking about. This is saying, like, it doesn't matter what you feel like, what your issues are, whether he abuses you or not, you still give it up. And here's the problem, is she also goes on to dismiss spousal rape as though it's not even a thing that happened. So she wrote on her website, in the case I mentioned in the video, which I was actually asked a question about a woman who she woke up in the middle of the night and her husband was doing things to her. She says, in the case I mentioned in the video, this wasn't marital rape. Her husband doesn't physically abuse her. He woke up in the middle of the night, maybe he wasn't even fully awake for all we know, and began having sex with his wife. What does this mean? Was he having full-on intercourse with her, or was he having foreplay with her? We don't know. She didn't tell me. If he was having full-on intercourse with her, she must be a very sound sleeper. Even if he was, I would never consider this marital rape. Let's say I did tell her, yes, that this was marital rape. Then she would report it to the police in the morning. Her husband may be put in jail, and then he would lose his job, and they would have no means to support their family. Totally, completely dismisses marital rape. And this is the stick in my craw that I cannot handle because of the fundamentalist belief. Our body does not belong to anyone but ourselves. We're going to do our body is not our own. Defraud not one another. You know what? That needs to be flipped and put on the other side too. Our husbands should not be allowed to deprive us emotionally, deprive us from help, deprive us financially, should not neglect us for ministry or other jobs. But you know what? That happens and no one ever talks about it. Instead, despite all the fact that our needs are not met, and yes, it is not selfish to want your needs to be met, to be treated like a normal human, we are still required to spread our legs open for our husbands or our partners. Well, in this case, it has to be a husband because, good Christian. You have to still be able to give yourself up to him, whether you want to or not. If not, then in her mind, and she has said this more than once, it is your fault if he cheats on you. She even put up that she would never in a million years even think about divorcing her husband if he cheated on her. Which, you know what? To me, everyone has their own individual... Sorry, my dog scared me. So everyone has their own individual relationship, and they know what they will tolerate and will not tolerate. Things happen, and I don't judge people who stay in relationships who have had a spouse that cheats, but I don't believe that it is right for us to blanket statement that you should never do this and never do that because God hates divorce, and so basically, essentially, God's going to hate you if you do this. He puts up, when I was young, I was sure I would divorce Ken if he ever had an affair. Now I know what a huge mistake that would be. Bitterness defiles many. This would include my children. Hebrews 12:15. I get so irritated whenever they start quoting Bible verses or referencing them just to twist their point. We are commanded to forgive others 70 times 7. You are right. We are commanded to do that, but we are not commanded to stay in that relationship, are we? Our children wouldn't have grown up with a mother and father in the same home. You know what? It's not always safe for kids to grow up in a home with two parents. I would have failed to bear all things and endure all things, and many things from 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. That is not what that's talking about either. I would have torn asunder our one flesh marriage and failed to win him without a word, with a meek and quiet spirit, 1 Peter 3:16. I would have missed the blessings of growing older with him, enjoying family gatherings, and celebrating 35 years of marriage to one man. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and never fails. So essentially, if you do not stay inside this abusive marriage, or if you do not stay with a cheating spouse, or if you do not stay with fill in the blank that is considered bad by fundies, you are losing out on God's blessing. Let me ask that to the lady who was married to someone for 35 years who was physically, emotionally, mentally abusive and finally got out, and she's in her 50s or in her 60s and trying to rebuild her life. Tell her that she'd made the right decision to stay. and that she got to enjoy all those blessings. No, because you know what you would do, Lori? You would tell her that it was her fault that she did not have the right spirit and have the right submission to her husband. That is why she's unhappy. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, she's also very much a proponent for a very particular type of discipline for children, written by the Pearls, which is called How to Train Up a Child, where they talk about spanking your children with a paint stick or with a glue stick, or carpet training them, which is where you put a baby, crawling age baby, on a rug and tell them they stay there. And if they crawl off, you spank them and put them back. And sometimes even by putting things that they want off of the rug, you put it outside of that bubble, and if they try to go for it, you then spank them again and put them back. It's like this whole power struggle dynamic with a baby. The goal is to break spirits and not to develop character. She even bragged about how she actually kicked her kids out on Christmas Day because they got up and went downstairs and opened up the presents without them. What is one Christmas that stands out for you for some reason? Question mark. When my children were 1, 3, 5, 7, I woke up at 5 a.m. and went downstairs and they had opened up every single present. I was so upset. I took off my soft, flimsy slipper and began spanking them with it and letting them know I was clearly angry, like Jesus in the temple. Sorry, I was like really triggered right then. I ran upstairs crying and let Ken know. He came down and had a long talk with them and set them out on the porch, threw them out of the Garden of Eden for their sin, and made them ponder their sin. They all came in and humbly apologized. We'll never forget this Christmas. What about you? What the actual F is this? They're tiny. They're babies. They're young. They do not have reasoning skills. They're just excited for freaking Christmas. I mean, yeah, would I be upset if I came downstairs and my kids already opened up Christmas presents? Yes, I would probably be hurt and disappointed, but that is on me. And we would have a conversation about, respecting other people's time, and having empathy because other people are looking forward to such things, but I would not. It's just the whole thing. So I want to actually parentheses this here because a lot of the things that she is teaching, I ascribe to. I started disciplining, not to the degree of the Pearls, but I did start disciplining my children at a very young age because it's what I was told. But I had the fortunate circumstance that my mom at that point had started doing foster work, and she started telling me, you know what, I'm learning a lot as a parent now that I should not have spanked you guys across the board. All of you are very individual. You guys are all very different. And I should have handled discipline very differently. And so through her wisdom and her learning to change, she helped me realize that my children are very individual and we discipline very much in different ways now. We have conversations, whatever. Nothing like this. But this type of abuse and this type of discipline is seen as a badge of honor for parents. Like, whenever kids are picked up and dragged out of church and they're screaming, going, I don't want a spanking, other parents and moms and dads are laughing and they think it's funny because like, oh, we understand. We've done it too, Jim Bob. Yay. Go take care of that kid. And it's just bad. With the abuse, like, she never acknowledges or says that people are allowed to leave for any type of abuse. And she had this one commenter saying, I'm a bit torn on the issue. While I do not like divorce, I believe that you should do everything in order to avoid it. There are times I believe it's warranted. Growing up, my mother's best friend physically abused her and their children. There are many times she would show bruises and black eyes, and she and the children would stay a few days until they went back home. The abuse got so bad, she and the children moved away, and I never saw them again. So while I believe that marriage is forever, I can't condone marriages in which one partner is physically abusive. And Lori responds with, I understand your sentiment, Monique, but it's not biblical for a woman to divorce her husband because he is physically abusing her. Yes, she needs to seek help and may even have to get police involved, then separate for a time until he repents of his evil deeds. But there is nothing in God's word that says this is a reason for divorce. We must base our opinions and actions upon the Bible, not what we feel is right. And then she links a post about difficulties and destructive marriages. So in other words, it doesn't matter. You submit. It just blows my mind. So for a woman who is very gender role specific, she's very, women stay home and take care of their children, women do all the work at home, women don't work at all. It's very fascinating to me that she also once worked, and she also sent all of her children to public school, and her kids, some of her kids have gone to college. She hires in nannies and housekeepers to do work around her house for her while she is currently building up her social media platform. And to me, isn't that technically working outside the home if you are taking away from your housely, wifely duties by filming things and putting them on the internet and getting paid for it? She is very anti-feminism, and let me tell you, we are ingrained very much in the funny world to be very anti-feminist. Anti-feminism, because we're told that feminism is, you know, pink hat wearing, burn all the men down, hate every guy, men are dirt, all of these things. And really what feminism is about equality, that women want to be treated as equal as men, that we have the same to contribute to society, that we want to have the right to vote and to own property and to get our kids in a divorce, and just a slew of many things. We want to be able to provide for ourselves and have our own bank accounts and have ourselves as a nest egg if we need to, in case we are in an abusive relationship. But Lori is very much against this. So she says, why would any woman want to be a school teacher today with how corrupt the school systems have become and how unruly the children are? Why would anyone want to be a nurse with how corrupt medicine has become and what is required of them? Home is the best and safest place for women. First, we need good teachers. We actually have a massive teacher shortage right now. And kids need good examples in the school system. I know that for my own kids, since I was homeschooled and I went to a small Christian school, I don't really have that one teacher that goes, she made a difference for me. You know, my mom was very significant in my life. So just as my mom. But I know with my own children who have gone to public school, there have been very significant moments in teachers who have invested in them that have changed the course of their life or their idea or their self-confidence. And they look back and go, because of this teacher, I was able to accomplish these things. So teachers are just so important. And so are nurses. There's a nursing shortage. And you know what? If you are pro-life and you don't want to assist in abortions, you don't have to work in an abortion clinic. Because that's what this is about. That's what she says. Whenever she says how corrupt medicine has become and what is required of them, she is specifically hinting at nurses who have to assist in abortions. Good nurses. We need people who are there, who are willing to hold hands of people who are passing away whenever they have no one else around them. During the time of COVID, whenever people were dying in droves in the hospitals alone, these nurses stepped up and were such a huge lifeline for these people and the families. So this to me is just so incredibly horrible. And home is not always the best and the safest place for women. I have intentionally built a life and have been blessed with a life that my home is safe for myself and my children and my husband. Not a lot of women have that. Not a lot of children have that. So to sit there and say the only place you are allowed to be and be in God's will is behind these four walls with the door shut and the window shut, and the only time you jump is whenever he says hi, that is wrong. Here's what she says about women going to college, even though she's also a college graduate. Most women who go to college fornicate, which causes infertility in many and puts them on the divorce merry-go-round. It teaches them nothing about being godly wives, mothers, homemakers. Christian colleges don't even teach this. They prepare them for careers. Yes, because women now have gotten smart where we want to have this ability to support ourselves. It doesn't mean that every woman who goes to college stays in a career. And every woman who is a stay-at-home mom is uneducated. There are women who have a desire and a design to want to stay home and be with their children, but there are some women who it is mentally detrimental for them to do so. I love my family, love them. I would do anything for my family. My family comes first, but I also love them enough to know I cannot be a stay-at-home parent. I don't have the patience. I don't have the ability to have this outlet that I need for myself to refill my own cup to then be the best for my family. Doesn't mean that I'm perfect around them at all, but I mean having the ability to work even as an entrepreneur, teaching music and different things and doing the YouTube platform, this gives me this creative outlet to then bring in some, not with YouTube, but with my music stuff, I can bring in money and help contribute financially, but I'm also still very involved in my family. According to Lori, what I'm doing is sinful and wrong. And I'm sorry, if teaching my daughters to have full independence is wrong, I will be wrong. She says, if you're offended by being taught to be submissive to your husband, not deprive him sexually, be silent in churches and keepers at home, you may as well admit that you have a problem with God and his will, not the one who is teaching these things. Repent, believe, and obey him. Okay, not offended by the teaching of being submissive to my husband. I'm offended by the people who try to enforce it and who try to take advantage of it, so women are kept underfoot and with a shoe on their neck and held down and oppressed. Because, yeah, I honor and respect my husband, but it is not a subservient thing. I honor and respect him because I love him as a human being, and he also gives me the same love and respect. There's no hierarchy here. There's no Bill Gothard umbrella going on. We are literally a team. We don't have to be silent in the churches. That was totally contextual for that time period. And honestly, I don't have a problem with God and his will. You know what? There's a lot of women in the Bible who were not just stay-at-home people. Deborah was fantastic. She was a judge. She was a prophetess. You know, you have Esther, who was a queen, who went against all the grain and was not submissive to her husband and went up against him. And that's just naming a few. Make sure to marry men who will wash dishes after dinner. This is bad advice. Make sure to marry a godly man who will work hard to provide. If you're too tired to wash dishes after dinner, wash them the next day. Let him relax after he comes home from work and eating dinner. So essentially, I marry a helpless baby. That's pretty much what you're telling me to do. Marriage is not the woman is the maid and the whatever fits the mood at the time. Marriage is a partnership. We're striving for the same goal, to have a successful life together, to raise successful and productive children in society. And there is no one or the other. There is no gender roles okay, the Bible does not say, men, your job is to take out the trash, go work at the factory for 12 hours, come home, sit on the couch, drink a Coke or a beer. And women, your job is to get up at 5 a.m., make bread, make breakfast, get the kids ready for school, teach them at home if you're homeschooling, take them to school, clean the house, get the laundry done, manage appointments, manage the household, manage all of these things, and still be willing to give it up at the end of the day. We have our own strengths and weaknesses that we bring to a marriage. And this one, instead of telling your husband every time he hurts your feelings or did something you didn't like, pour grace on him. You wouldn't want him pointing out all of your failings. Treat him the way you want to be treated. Love does not keep account of wrong suffered. Oh my God. This post is so bad. Okay, listen. She's essentially saying don't have open communication with your husband. Don't do anything but keep sweet and keep a smile on your face and give it up for England every night, okay? Because you don't want him talking bad about you to your face, do you? You know what? No, honestly, I would rather have open communication with my husband so I know when I am doing things that bother him and vice versa. And I'd rather us have hard conversations than to have things wash under the rug for 30, 40 years and be bitter old people like people I see now as couples who have been married for 50 years, but they can't hardly stand to be in the same room with each other. But they have a godly marriage because they've been stuck together that long. And my dad would use this. Love does not keep account of wrong suffered. I cannot tell you how many times I was told, well, God's forgiven me. Now this is in the past. You need to let it go. No, that is just a dismissive way of allowing for pattern behavior and abuse to continue to happen. If someone continuously chops on your finger with a knife, guess what? That finger's coming off and it's never going back on the same way, okay? That was a really bad example, but I'm really pissed off about this. Because just because you're not holding something against someone does not mean you have to put up with their abuse. You are not a doormat. You are worthy of love and respect for the person that you are as a human being, as a creation of God. However you want to view yourself, you do not have to sit there and endure abuse because someone twisted a Bible verse and told you that you had to, especially someone like this. So tone deaf, and she also is very dismissive of people who have mental health issues. Instead of delving into one's childhood and past hurts from parents, as most marriage counselors do with couples they're mentoring, couples need to be taught who they are in Christ and walk in obedience to Him. This is the answer to having a great marriage, not blaming parents or others on how we are as an adult. We are to be known for pouring love and grace upon others. Yes, that even includes our parents. An ungodly world is watching us. We are being salt and light, or simply promoting the idea that Christians are no different than unbelievers. That's not Christ's death on the cross and was not Christ's death on the cross and resurrection enough for you. Oh my God. It makes me so mad. The reason that we have emotionally immature adults running around is because we don't deal with our issues. We were taught to stuff them under the rug and just ignore them. We are taught in fundamentalism and in Christianity that, you know what, it doesn't matter what type of environment you grow up in. It is your choice how you deal with life as an adult. So if you were abused, get over it. If you were hurt, get over it, because ultimately it's on you to fix it. I will acknowledge there are people who use their past as an excuse not to move forward. There are people who love to have the victim mentality and stay in that victim mindset. But by and large, people need to talk about their trauma in a safe and a warm space where they can get out the things that have been hurting them for their entire life. And I will tell you from personal experience, having a traumatic past in a very volatile relationship with my dad, that very much bled over into my marriage with my husband. I struggled so much with leaving them alone with him, not because of his PTSD, but because of trauma that had happened to me. And if he would get upset, I would immediately interject myself between him and the children because I was trying to protect them and shield them. I had to go through therapy to realize that my husband is not my dad when it comes to disciplining children. How was I supposed to work through that and process that if I never talked about it? A hard time with loud noises and with shouting and the snapping of a belt and all these different things. And talking about them in a safe, constructive way has helped me develop tools to not be as reactive as I used to be. And yes, we are supposed to pour out grace and love. And I truly believe that love should be our driving force in all things that we do. Loving someone and giving grace to someone is not the same as putting up and accepting their behavior and how they treat you. They are totally different. They are not even cousins. They're not even 10th cousins. They're not even in the same room. I love my dad, despite all of the things that I have dealt with him. I love him. And there's not a day or a week that goes by that it does not break my heart that I don't have a relationship with him that I imagined or wished I could have had or could have with him. But the reality is he's not a safe person. I can't trust him. But I don't hate him. Now, no, it's not the same for everyone, and that's okay. I'm just telling you my experience. I hate that we are forced into this fake joy and contentment, and we have to always be happy and okay all the time, because that is not humanly possible. And yeah, I'm going to have people come back to me and say, well, you know, if it was with God, in God, all things are possible. Yeah, I get that. And honestly, this point in my life, I am at the most peace and the happiest and the most content I've ever been in my entire life. At all. Zero, no comparison. That is because I have finally become honest with myself, and I've worked through my issues. My husband is working through his issues, and we're intentionally leading our lives with love and acceptance and seeing people for who they are and setting healthy boundaries for ourselves. Christianity and evangelicalism obliterates boundaries. Zero. You're not allowed to have any, especially in parent-children relationships. And that's why I get really irritated whenever they're like, an ungodly world is watching us. We are to be salt and light, and or are we just promoting the idea that Christians are no different believers? Guess what? We're no different. We are all humans. The only difference is that we believe in a God and in a Christ who sacrificed himself, and we are choosing to live our lives according to the principles that he put forward, not what some man in a suit and tie has interpreted for us. But granted, most people follow whatever the dude says. Sit there and put ourselves on a higher pedestal and pretend like, oh, we love and forgive everyone. When in reality, you know what? When the world looks at the church, you know what they see? Abusers, hypocrisy, anger, hidden things, dishonesty. They do not see the salt and the light. You know what they want to see? People want to see honesty and transparency. So I will always, I am an extremely transparent person. I mess up. I am a Christian. I don't know all the answers. I'm deconstructing. I'm still in this process, in this weird limbo of where I'm at. People relate to honesty and transparency and safety and love. They don't want to see this nice shiny veneer. Oh, I'm perfect. And as a pastor once said, you know, you look like you were a cotton swab dipped in bleach and you walked into church. Like, you're pure and perfect, and it's all just a show. I'm tired. I'm so tired of performance Christianity. It actually disgusts me. I'm tired of seeing people jump through all of these hoops thinking that this is what they have to do to be godly. We are persecuted because someone wants to, wants to go get married to someone who's like the same gender as them, or we're persecuted because we have to bake a cake for a same-sex marriage. And I'm just like, you have no concept. None. You have no concept of true persecution. You have no concept of really having true discrimination against you. We are in a nation that is founded on white evangelicalism. Okay, sorry, I have to get off of that rabbit trail. Let's move back. As we have looked, this is a little bit longer video than normal, but listen, this has been a very fascinating look into the mind and the ideas of Lori Alexander, the transformed wife. I do not agree with anything she says. Zero. I like her content simply because she makes it very easy to react to on my TikTok channel, because the stuff that comes out of her mouth just blows my mind 99.9% of the time, because she says the unsaid things. Like, she actually says things that, like, I know was like just automatically expected and like we had to live this way, but she just says them. She throws them out there. She's like, yep, marital rape's not a thing. So as we conclude this episode, if you like this type of deep dive, please like the video, leave a comment so I know if you want me to bring more into it in the next few months. I'm looking at doing one on like Above Rubies, and various like pastors and evangelicals. I can't speak today. Evangelicals. What you would like to see, I would love to hear from you. Like this. If you don't want to leave a comment, just like it so I know that this is like the direction that I can go. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, like the video, share it. Don't forget about the 500 subscriber challenge so I can cry on camera while eating spicy things. If you have your own story you would like to share, submit to me so I can read it on the air, or have memes or different topics you'd like for me to try to discuss, please follow the link or the instructions in the description box below here. And I'll get that and I will work those into a video in the coming months. Until next time, my beautiful friends, everyone has a story. What's yours?